Aloha, I'm David Roth. I'm a triple board certified physician practicing in Honolulu, Hawaii. I've been involved in telemedicine since 2000, and it's been a very substantial part of my medical practice since 2009. I have no conflicts of interest to report, and I do not specifically endorse any specific software or equipment. Let me start by telling you a little bit about our telemedicine program. Our program began in earnest in 2009 when we converted our existing private practice to telepsychiatry. And shortly afterwards, we received a contract from our Department of Education to do telemedicine evaluations and treatment of students throughout 3 of the islands, and later this expanded to all of the islands statewide. We now see patients in their homes and in their schools across 6 Hawaiian islands and 3 of the United States. We did this without grant funding, university funding, or venture capital. We currently accept commercial health insurance plans and private pay patients in addition to the Department of Education contract. Telemedicine has become one of our passions, and we also teach telemedicine and how to do it well to various professionals and organizations at various meetings over the last 6 years. Our current telemedicine technology is fairly simple. We're using a cable modem with adequate upload and download speed. We have a backup hotspot off of our mobile phone network, and we're currently using the software provider VC as a cloud-based, HIPAA-compliant telemedicine platform. We've used other platforms in the past. Our sites are currently patient homes and our clinic, and schools to our clinic. And so after 20,000 sessions, we've learned a few things. And these strategies will help you feel more confident and become a more competent telemedicine provider. In our opinion, telemedicine is more than just a provider on camera. So here are some of the core concepts we believe you need to understand to be able to do telemedicine well. Telemedicine is not a technology. It's actually, in our opinion, a new venue for delivering medical care. And creating an authentic engagement and rapport between patient and provider is more dependent on the provider's bedside manner and communication skills than a regular traditional face-to-face setting. You don't have buildings, offices, framed diplomas, and courteous staff to set the stage for the clinical encounter. And in order to build this engagement and develop rapport, it will require you to have thoughtful room staging, intentional participant arrangement, a technical understanding of the equipment and software you're using, enhanced nonverbal communication, and strategic time management. So let's begin with an exercise. I would like you to take out your phone, introduce yourself to someone next to you, and take their picture. I'll give you a few seconds to take each other's picture. Alrighty, folks. So, are you proud of the picture? Can you do it better? Do you think they would let you post it on Facebook? So let's talk about how to do that part of it better. This is what we call staging the video conference, and it's a critical element of creating and sustaining an engaging medical experience. So what do we mean by setting the stage? Well, it first off is about selecting the right place in which to conduct this medical interaction. And so you're going to want to choose the rooms carefully that you're going to use for both the patient site and the provider site. And you're going to pay attention to design, configuration, and lighting in order to achieve participant comfort, both for you and for them, privacy, minimal distraction. You want to see and be seen, hear and be heard. Now, first and foremost, you must consider privacy. Anybody spot the problem? And once you've gotten a room that's private, you want to make sure that it's also quiet enough to do this well and not have a lot of distraction. So what you're going to hear is an audio clip of several real background noises that we've had to contend with in various sessions. So if you don't necessarily believe me, let me have you learn a little bit from one of our experts. This is Mahealani Richardson, an award-winning network news anchor who's on the nightly news here in Honolulu.
Well, in a video conference situation, inevitably the dog is going to bark or the little baby might start crying. And the most important thing to do is just to laugh it off and say, it's okay. You know, try to fix whatever might be happening or get over the disruption and try your best to get back into the conversation.
Another critical element of staging is actually power and network. And what I mean by this is you want to have stable power. Running out of power really disrupts a video conference. And secondly, you want to have a stable internet connection. And an Ethernet cable is the gold standard for this. You want to be plugged into your network and connected to your internet device, your modem, or your router. And if that is not possible, or for the patient that's not possible, they need to bring a mobile device or a Wi-Fi enabled device as close to their router as possible to ensure a good signal. So in summary, when selecting a room, make sure it will remain private, that everyone feels comfortable, that distractions are minimized, that everyone can see each other, everyone can hear each other, and there's a good internet connection. So let's move on to what you do with the room now that you've selected it. And then we talk about framing. What's in the box? What can the patient see? And what can you see? Now first, you need to think about the appearance of the room you've chosen, because the room and its furnishing will convey a lot about you and your purpose, and whether or not you're an organized, disciplined professional. And if you're not, you can make adjustments by choosing how to frame and extrude the inappropriate furnishings. And when you do this, you also want to use the same skills that newscasters do in order to frame themselves well and be seen clearly. And you want to have this as close up as possible without being awkwardly too close or so narrow that you fall out of the frame. And so a good rule of thumb is called the 1/3 rule. And that means your eyes are about 1/3 from the top of the screen. Next, you want to appear as if you're making eye contact with the person on the other end of this conversation. And you must do that by looking at the camera. However, if their image is not close to the camera, it can appear as if you're looking over their shoulder or somewhere else or distracted. So we recommend placing the camera right next to or as close as possible to the image of the person you will see, so that when you're looking at their image, you will be looking at the camera, and that will create apparent eye contact. It's equally important then to arrange the images on your screen so that it's stacked appropriately. And what we've also learned is that if you put your electronic health record on the screen, you will have to move your head to look at it. And if you're looking away from the patient's picture, by moving your head side to side, you're subtly conveying no. So make things stacked vertically so that you can be looking up and down, signaling yes as you move between their image and your software program. You want to give some thought to the participant arrangement because you want them to fit in the frame. And this may require a little bit of close proximity between people in order to keep them close enough to the device to be able to see and hear well, but yet far enough away that you can capture all of them in the frame. For a single person, that's relatively easy. It gets harder with larger groups, and particularly challenging with kids. And so having a parent really control the children and also having the device set far enough back that if they move around, you can see what's happening is critical, especially working with kids and especially with autistic kids. Lighting. Without good lighting, you can't see what you're doing. They can't see you. You can't really feel like it's an authentic session. So let me demonstrate a couple of lighting basics. It should be obvious to you that this room is inadequately lit. However, if you add a reasonable amount of light, it appears well lit. And this is good for normal working conditions, but as you can see with the embedded image, it's hard to appreciate the detail of the patient unless you add additional light. And this is what we recommend, is that there's at least one more light source than you would normally need in order to give the camera enough light to adequately project an image through the system to the other side. And if you have seen any stage lighting or professional photographers, you know that there's often an even uncomfortable amount of light in those settings in order to produce a good image. And so it's a careful balance between having the extra light you need and overlighting a session, which will cause glare and will cause details to wash out of the picture. Sound is extremely important in video conferences because if you cannot hear or be heard, then the clinical work is dramatically impaired. So you need to understand a little bit about the microphone options. The Polycom systems and other freestanding systems will often have a very nice microphone, but it needs to be positioned close to participants. If you're unable to do that and you need to have a separate audio connection, we recommend using a duplex device like the one seen here in the Polycom table, where you can talk and be heard, and they can talk and be heard simultaneously. Duplexing allows simultaneous sending and receiving, which is extremely important when you have someone who's manic or very emotional, so that you can break into their monologue. And when you use a microphone for yourself, I recommend investing in a high quality one. It makes a big difference in terms of how much of your natural vocal quality is transmitted through the internet connection. If you remember old telephones with old long distance from many years ago, there was always a tinny or flattened quality to the voice. So better microphones will pick up your voice better. Whether you use the earbud on the left or a table mic on the right, it just depends on your comfort and personal preference. So there are some common problems that I want to help you avoid, and there's some that you'll just have to anticipate.
So what do you do when something goes wrong with a video conference? Well, first thing, you have to realize something will go wrong. Just get over it. 20 years of television news, something went wrong in the show every single day. So I'm used to problem solving, dealing with technical issues, and the most important thing to do when a technical issue happens is to let the person know on the other end that it's going to be okay. The worst thing for you to do is to panic yourself, even though you are panicking on the inside, you're freaking out on the inside, but try your best not to show it. The worst thing for you to do is to freak out in front of your patient, because that will leave them feeling very uncomfortable about the situation.
So fortunately, the solution to most of those problems is the mute button, and I would encourage you to use that often. One of the most common distracting sounds is actually the keyboard clicks. If you're like me and you take notes during the session, the keyboard click can become the dominant background noise. So it's worth investing in a quieter keyboard or separating the keyboard from the video conferencing device or computer, and we use an underlayment to help diminish the sounds. Another common problem is from the extra lighting you'll need, glares that can appear on shiny surfaces, and that's why it's important to cover any of those, as you see on the right picture, whenever possible. Something I see all the time is people do not zoom in. As a result, they appear very distant within the frame and very small on the screen, and this makes it difficult to really have a good connection because of the distance and the signal of distance emotionally that distance creates. And another very common problem is people falling out of the frame. Most people aren't used to staying within the frame, and if you're feeling self-conscious about watching yourself in the self-monitoring picture, you'll turn that off. And the danger of turning that off is you won't be monitoring where you are in your frame. And so I encourage you to keep that self-monitoring picture on and to occasionally check where you are in your own frame. There are many movements that can distract. The most common ones I see are fans, blowing curtains, people bouncing their legs and subsequently bouncing the devices that are attached to the desk that they're bumping into. And of course, the most common one is people trying to hold a portable device either in their arms or on their lap, and that creates a very unstable picture. And here's an example. So what I'd like to do now is see if you've been able to absorb some of this information and put it to good use. So we're going to do an exercise that's very similar to the one you did initially. Find your same partner, plan how you're going to stage and light, and with this you can move around the room, take each other's picture, and compare the pictures to the first one you took this morning. And I'll give you 2 minutes to complete this exercise. One minute. All right, let's begin wrapping it up. Alrighty, folks. How'd you do as a photographer? What do you think about the background, the lighting, the framing, eye level, participant arrangement? Did you do better than the first time? And how did you look as a participant? Did you appear professional? How was your eye contact? Were you smiling? What was your body posture like? What kind of gestures were you using? The reason I bring these up is that this is the subject of our next section, which is how to appear professional and compassionate in the telemedicine venue.
You have to rise above the fact that you're really talking to just a flat computer screen. And part of it's acting. Part of it is you're just kind of faking it. But don't think of it as faking it. Don't think of it as being unrealistic, because you're really trying to portray and trying to tell them very important information. And so when you do it in a way that's perhaps a little more animated than what you're used to, it's actually not when they're receiving it on the other end.
So you need to behave differently on camera, and this is because the camera restricts our ability to see the whole person in detail, to be heard and well understood, to touch to smell, to make gestures, to maintain eye contact, to demonstrate our usual bedside manners, and to seem genuine and compassionate. And the limited frame restricts our perception specifically of their nonverbal communication and their perception of our nonverbal communication. And this deprives them some of the nonverbal information used to forge engagement and maintain rapport. And so during video conferences, you must compensate for the diminished nonverbal communication. So what are nonverbals? Here's an example of a gesture that would normally be a physical interaction, but on camera appears as simply a fist bump gesture. So nonverbals are important because spoken language does not efficiently communicate our feelings and ideas to other people. And a lot of our communication is through these nonverbal clues like facial expression, posture, and gestures. And the meaning of our words really makes up a very small amount of the information the other person is perceiving. And so this affects rapport because communication is much more effective when people use nonverbal communication that reinforces and clarifies their spoken words because it enhances their understanding of our intentions, our priorities, our emotions, and our feelings. And if it's not congruent, if it's incongruent, then it seems deceptive, or it seems off-putting, or confusing. In the same way that if you're smiling while telling a sad story, there's something going on there, and it's disconcerting. So you must have skilled awareness of and use of these nonverbals to enhance your telehealth sessions. You're going to use nonverbal communication to replicate the good bedside manner despite the limitations of the camera, to forge a strong engagement and sustain good rapport, and appear very attentive and genuinely interested as a listener. Nonverbal is broken down into several categories: physical appearance, vocalics, kinesics, proxemics, and haptics. Let's begin with the physical appearance. You want to maintain professional dress to inspire patient confidence. Good grooming is necessary, but stage makeup is not. With voice control, you need to be mindful of the way you speak, the rate, the rhythm, the volume, your emphasis, and most importantly, the pausing. And the reason I say most importantly, there's a delay in the communication over the internet, and you need to pause a little more to give people a chance to reply. Otherwise, you end up talking over the other person instead of encouraging them to reciprocate or communicate. Body position is important, and in the camera, you need to be able to be seen as open, and this is mostly shown by how you hold your arms. It's hard for them to perceive whether or not your legs are crossed or uncrossed, but you can certainly read that information on others. This is a good example of closed. It does have a little bit of a thoughtful look, holding the chin, but it is a closed body language. So ways we found to improve gestures as a way of signaling more congruent emotional state is to use thumbs up or eyebrows, nodding more frequently, and this will help communicate your opinion without disturbing the speaker. And similarly, you can signal a disapproval or raise your hand to interrupt the speaker if you need to make your opinion known. Two gestures that we find particularly important to avoid are the vacant stare and technique face. The vacant stare comes from being distracted usually, and the technique face is something I see very often as people are mastering the technology. They get scrunched up and overly concerned as they try to find a button or scroll through the electronic health record or find a way to make something work. And all the patient can see is the facial expression. They can't see what's causing it, and there's a danger of them misinterpreting it as a negative criticism or judgment towards them. So keep in mind then, as a default facial position, to smile, and adding the nod so that you're moving your head up and down with the smile really helps maintain rapport. And it helps make up for the need to break eye contact to look at the EHR, a clock, or documents. And it's a gesture that's very easily seen in the camera. Ways that you can improve your distance, the proxemic, is by moving closer into the camera to signal more intimacy or friendliness, or to move back or turn away slightly to give the appearance of giving them more space. And this helps adjust what would normally occur with a more physical movement towards them or away from them in an office setting. And you can't touch people, so we can't really use haptics in the way you would in a traditional setting. But we found, and especially with the kids, replacing the touch with a gesture towards the camera, like the fist bump you saw earlier on, a high five, or a wave, really helps signal that strong agreement. And so keep in mind that you want to intentionally and more frequently use a variety of nonverbal communication elements during your sessions.
So you're a physician, and you are the best that you can be, and you know what you're talking about. You've studied it for years. So don't forget that, because you have an important message to convey. And when you walk into a situation, of course you're going to be nervous. Of course you're going to worry about the camera. You're going to worry about the way you sound, the way you look. But you know what? Just take a deep breath and tell yourself over and over again, it's going to be okay.
So let's move on to the next element, which is the structure, flow, and the way to properly close a telemedicine session. In our opinion, a good telemedicine session is a reciprocal conversation where the patient feels he or she has the provider's full attention. It's well structured with a clear flow that the participants can anticipate, and it starts and ends as scheduled. But there's a narrative aspect to it, and this is why I think that choosing a structure for it is important, because that will help guide the participants and help them understand their role in this collaborative storytelling. It'll help you and them plan and monitor timing, and then you will have a better signal for when you're intentionally closing the session. So what do I mean by structure and flow? I'm thinking actually about typical storytelling. In shorter sessions, we would compare it to a 3-act play. Our longer sessions, we would compare to a 5-act play. In a 3-act play, there's a predictable structure of a beginning, a working through, and a conclusion. And in a 5-act play, you would have the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the denouement. In our work, this would translate to an opening and greeting, a casual catching up, then moving into the work of the session. The 4th section is kind of a summary or a wrapping up or restatement, and that gives the patient an opportunity to ask for clarification or to introduce the, oh, by the way, the extra information or extra question with plenty of time for you to address it. And lastly, the closing, which would be the opportunity for you to signal that it's ending, the typical social greeting of saying goodbye, and then, if necessary, scheduling the follow-up session. So closing a session is extremely important. If it's done well, the flow of the entire session has seemed effortless and natural. But when it's done poorly, you seem rude or disinterested, and this can have a negative impact on patient care and make it difficult to finish on time. You want to prepare for the closing. Think about planning discharge at admission. You want to be thinking about what time you're going to need to begin the closing process and how you're going to signal the end. And that communication of the ending is critical because you can't see or hear all the typical signals that you would give in an office. So some of the typical verbal signals that we use to close are summarizing the content, trying to leave on a positive note, planning the follow-up, or whatever social greeting like wishing them well is appropriate for their culture. And some of the nonverbal closing signals we use are moving away or back from the camera, raising your hand to signal that we've got to stop, looking towards your clock, and breaking eye contact in general, breaking that state of engagement. So when it's done well, the closing helps tie everything up nicely and ensure that you run on time. And I wanted to mention this briefly, that running on time is especially critical in telemedicine because you may not have a waiting room or staff that can inform the patient that they need to wait for 3, 5, or 10 minutes as you get through a crisis or if you're running behind. But this is very difficult for a patient to tolerate because staring at a blank computer screen for 2 minutes is very, very difficult, and it's very common for them to get distracted, to leave the computer, or to experience frustration, and this will negatively impact your session. So now that you've seen a lot about the various aspects of staging, nonverbal communication, and structure and flow of these sessions, let's see if you can test your knowledge with a few example slides. So each slide will demonstrate a good or bad technique. We'll indicate the good ones with the check and the bad with the X. Let's go on to the first slide. So what's right about this one? The answer is good gesture and good smile and good framing. What's wrong about this one? This slide is to demonstrate overexposure or the risk of too much light. What's wrong about this one? Privacy. And this one? Typical of falling out of the frame and reminding us of the need of self-monitoring. What's good about this one? This is the 1/3 rule. This is properly framing. On a side note, she has a great smile, great eye contact. What's wrong about this one? This actually happens to me if I don't close my window blinds because I often work in the evening as the sun sets and the red glare will come to one side of my face. This is making noises. Again, use the mute button if you must do things, and especially when you have to move papers because the microphone picks up the sound better than it picks up the sound of a human voice. This one is demonstrating a stern look, which borders on technique face. And this one is the use of a gesture to replace a touch, to replace a haptic. And she also has congruent nonverbals of good eye contact and a smile. This is what it looks like if you lean forward to write a prescription while you're on a video conference. You have to be mindful of what the other person is seeing at all times. Yes, this one is about inadequate lighting. I have not met a person who can hold a phone steady in front of them for the entire time. And lastly, this is congruent nonverbals, the gesture of the shaka, which is the Hawaiian hand greeting, combined with good eye contact and a smile and open body language. I want to thank you for your participation and for inviting me here to join you today, and I wish you a fond aloha. If you want anything from me, feel free to contact me at the email you see below. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of your conference.